This session will dig into how the brain makes decisions, which is crucial for brain and spine tumor patients and their families and all of us as we're navigating the course of cancer care. So today with us is Dr. Ken Kishida. I am extremely delighted to introduce him. He is a friend, he is a colleague, he is just an incredibly thoughtful individual. He's associate professor in the Department of Translational Neuroscience and the Department of Neurosurgery at Wake Forest University. Over the many years of his work, he's developed innovative technologies that has allowed the world's first real-time measurement of dopamine and serotonin release in the brain. And he's going to describe to us what the heck dopamine is and how it influences that decision-making. His research team is using new technology, non-invasive neuroimaging tools, computational models to investigate foundational questions into human consciousness and decision-making. And they also apply that knowledge to investigate the causes related to psychiatric and neurologic conditions in humans. And I think it will be a very relevant ending to our discussion of how do we move forward with the decisions that face us in the future. So without further ado, Dr. Kishida.
Thanks, Ryan. All right. Thank you, everybody, for having me. It's a real honor to be here in front of you guys today. Over the last few hours, listening to some of the breakout sessions and the talks, and also the questions and the comments that the audience provides, the level of vulnerability and openness here and support is really, really amazing. So I'm going to talk to you about decision-making. I do research in this. I'm a neuroscientist. I think this is really my way of coping with the world. If I can understand, why I did that, how I might be able to do better, or why did that person over there do that, maybe I can come to a little bit more understanding and patience when I'm frustrated, but then also really celebrate and enjoy the wins that we have every day. I'm going to do something that I typically don't do in talks. When I show data and what we're working on, I'll put citations, right, the primary literature for my peers in the scientific community. But I'm going to have QR codes throughout the talk. So if you have phones and you want to take pictures, I believe this is going to be recorded. You can go back to these QR codes, and what they'll take you to are either press releases or news articles that are actually talking about the literature and the work that we've done. It's a little more accessible. I find those more interesting to read sometimes. But you can get to that, and you can get to the primary literature if you want that. So that's there, and that's available. Feel free to take pictures as you see it. So I have no disclosures, but I do have gratitude, right, to everyone in this room. My work is more than 90% supported by the NIH. This is a government agency, right, funding biomedical research, and that comes from taxpayer money and support from you. So again, it's really an opportunity for me to share with you some of the work that I'm doing with your efforts. So the question that my lab is interested in is really best described and inspired in many ways by the movie The Matrix. Show of hands, how many have seen this movie? Awesome. So when I give this talk in front of undergraduate students or graduate students, that number is way lower, and then I go assign them as homework to go and watch that. But I'm thankful that I don't have to explain too much. Right, so the premise of the movie, the main character, Neo, is trapped in this virtual world, right, this dream-like world. And Morpheus comes to him and gives him the opportunity to see the truth, right, to reveal it. And he has to make this really hard choice. But really the whole movie is about that choice. The choices we make, how the environments that we're in, how our brain, gives us different levels of control, or how the environment might feel like it's controlling us. And it's about gaining control and exploring that. And as it's stated in the movie, right, the fundamental problem is choice. You make choices that take you to the truth, or that might make you feel better, may not be truthful. But how do we do this is the central question in my lab. How does experience come about? How do the choices we make influence that? How does it make us feel, right? This is really important just for fundamental decision making as we navigate, and there's a lot of decision making being discussed at this meeting from all different kinds of perspectives. But it's also fundamental to what we describe when we're talking about psychiatric and neurological conditions. right? So depression, substance abuse, these are driven by the feelings, right? The experiences that we have. It also constrains the kinds of choices that we can make. Right? These are two very clear-cut examples, I think, from the psychiatric realm. But as I've heard, and as many of you have expressed, there's all kinds of things that are constraining the choices that we can make. So I want to understand how the brain processes that. How might we navigate that? Now, as a scientist, the first thing I do is really define the problem, right? So what is a decision, and how do we measure that? I'm showing you kind of a spectrum of levels of control that we have as humans, right? The patellar tendon knee reflex, when the doctor hits your hammer, right? That's a sensation to your spinal cord right back to the muscles. That's a reflex. We don't really think of that as a choice, right? But in some sense, the biology is making a choice. Brushing our teeth and learning to do that, right? Eventually, we hope for our children, right? That becomes a habit. Right? But there's a lot of struggle and a lot of input that the caregiver has to provide to get there. And then, of course, the thinker, right? The idea that a lot of the choices, when we think of choices and decisions that we make, that it feels much more deliberative, quiet and inside. But just to note that, when the doctor goes to hit you with that hammer, one of the things they have to do is distract you, because if you think about it too much, you can override that impulse, right? That reflex. And there's a lot of choices that we make that feel reflexive, habitual, that if we can take a moment, we could exert some control. And again, what are the brain mechanisms underlying that is central to my lab. In order to study those decisions, right, we have to think about when do we make decisions. Of course, we make decisions all throughout our childhood, our adolescence, in the past and into the future. Decisions happen all along this path. But actually, it's from a scientific perspective, it's only happening now, right? Right now, you're making a decision to stay in your chair, not to walk out, right? Maybe, hopefully not, you're making a decision to try and willfully stay awake. I hope I haven't lost you that quick. But you're making decisions now. And so as a scientist, I want to get in and I want to study exactly when you make that decision, so we set things up to do that. Of course, though, right, when you make a decision now, that decision is influenced by your past, whether it's in the last few hours, last week, last month, last year, in your adolescence, right? I made some bad decisions then, in my childhood, right? These stick with us, right? And that sticks with us through changes in the structure of our brain. Sometimes they're conscious, declarative type memories, things you can tell stories about. Sometimes they're just latent, they're in there, and they still influence you. We want to understand those processes. Of course, the future influences your decisions too. And so how you think about and how you project into the future, these are all really, really critical. Why do we make decisions, right? If I'm going to get you to make a decision in my lab, all right, and I want to understand how we make decisions, we really need to know why we do that. And generically, we talk about trying to meet goals, right? We're reinforced by rewards that we might receive. But overall, right, it's about the things that we value. And that's different for everybody in every situation, right? If you're doing a job, you're doing rewards, collecting rewards, through your paychecks, right? Or maybe it's a goal to accumulate savings, right? I think in monetary terms, because that's really nice for the computational work we do, we can think of economic games and economic theory and build that into our mathematical models. But there's a lot of things that we subjectively value, relationships, experiences. And so really, our brain, our systems, are chasing down the things that we value, whatever they may be. And as we approach that, we're getting really interesting signals that we're trying to study. So the experimental setup, and how we get to the mechanics of how we make decisions. I start with this kind of black box analogy, right? There's input, there's output. The input to human systems, mammalian systems, right, is our eyes, our ears, our senses. And then the outputs, of course, are the behavior. And if I were a behavioral psychologist like Freud or Skinner, then maybe that's all I'd care about, the input about. I'm a neuroscientist, and so I want to demystify this black box, kind of peer into it a little bit. And so we use machines like the MRI scanner, but in a functional way, where we can look at changes in oxidation levels and in activity throughout the entire brain. And then something that's quite unique, as Dr. Stroud mentioned, direct measurements during surgical procedures, where we can get into the chemistry and these fluctuations that are happening in real time. So hopefully you can't read that, right? That's a bunch of equations. Those are real equations that we use within the lab. I tried to make them blurry and fuzzy so I don't geek out and try and tell you all about it. But it's just to say that we think about these problems in a very computational way, right? We think of the brain as a kind of wet machine, and that machine is processing information. And so we draw a lot from artificial intelligence, machine learning theory, to design ideas and hypotheses about how we think these mechanics are going on. And I will say that these systems of equations, if you go, not to that QR code, this talks about all our approaches and how we think about things. You can hear me and go to sleep over an hour period. But these equations will show up as in another QR code. I would say everyone knows how to calculate that math, right? You're doing it right now. Your brain is doing this, and it's actually encoded in your dopamine fluctuations, right? And I'll talk a bit about that in just a moment. All right, so back to the choice, right? Do we take the red pill and go deep down, or do we, keep the shade up? So we're going to choose the red pill, and in so doing, we're going to, our lab asks questions about Parkinson's disease, a neurological disorder where dopamine systems are degenerating, depression, medications that are used to treat these psychiatric conditions, impulse controls. And these are all models for the human experience, right? So even if you're not experiencing any of these things or have experience with these kinds of patient populations and these kinds of studies are giving us basic insights into how the human brain, writ large, generates experience and navigates choice. To dig into that, right, we use a variety of tools. I mentioned functional magnetic resonance imaging on the upper right. I'm going to talk about human voltammetry on the next slide, but we also use other kinds of intracranial recordings, like on the bottom right there, the intracranial stereo EEG. These are patients with epilepsy who go in to have electrodes placed throughout their brain that records electrical activity, trying to find where the seizures are starting. But we can capitalize on that with their consent and their volunteering to go and understand how these different regions are engaged in the decision-making process. Magnetoencephalography, it's kind of like the fMRI scanner. It gives us a non-invasive look, but at electrical activity. But I mentioned human voltammetry. So this is a very special technology. It's only been developed within the last 10 years by my group. And what we use to do this is called we make sub-second dopamine measurements in humans using blah, 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 blah. So I'll read it. A machine learning-based approach to fast scan cyclic voltammetry. So it's so new, I don't have a catchy title for it. The closest thing is human voltammetry. But what's happening here is that patients with Parkinson's disease or other movement disorders can have their symptoms treated if they have an electrode implanted deep into their brain. That gets left behind and is hooked up to a pacemaker, and it stimulates their brain basically for the rest of their life. And what that does is it alleviates the motor symptoms of freezing and rigidity. It's a savior for these patients. It's amazing. But in order to do that, these patients have to have brain surgery. A hole about the size of a nickel has to be drilled into their skull, and the electrode has to go in through that hole. The patients have to be awake during that procedure, because the doctors need to see what's going on in their brain as they're placing this to make sure that they get it just right, and they do everything just right so that when that patient leaves, it'll be efficacious. And so during that procedure, we can place our own electrodes. And again, ahead of time, we talk to the patients, we explain to them what's going to happen. We get their consent, and they volunteer for this. They're amazing individuals. But we place a carbon fiber electrode that we've designed deep into their brain to regions where dopamine and serotonin, norepinephrine are being released as we make decisions and choices and get feedback. And so this is just an image of a patient actually doing one of our tasks with the electrode in place. We're recording from a central kind of deep region of the brain, highlighted there in the yellow oval. And this patient was playing a stock market investment game. Right? It's basically a gambling game. They don't have any information about the market, but they see the market, and they have to decide whether they think the market's going to go up or it's going to go down. We endow them with $100 to begin with, and then they invest it. As they increase their bets or decrease their bets, they're going to win or lose money, actual money that will pay them after the fact. These are real decisions, not hypotheticals, based on what the market does, right? And so I'm going to show you here in real time how fast dopamine levels are playing during 2 subsequent trials within the task. Every time you see a green arrow, the patient is winning some money. So here we go. So dopamine, it's actually fluctuating in your brain right now about this quick. Maybe not that big because you're not winning any money, right? But we can use this kind of data just paired with our mathematical models to try and understand, what is this information encoding, and then how does it affect subsequent choices. So I'm showing you here in these kind of green ovals here and here, where dopamine neurons sit in the brain. And then these arrows that go throughout the brain are where they're sending their axons, their projections. Wherever those things go, dopamine can be released. And it's being released on these really fast timescales as you're interacting with your environment, as you're making decisions, and you're getting feedback. It's just a picture. Again, this is where the cell body would be. These are the projections. It's kind of like the telephone line sending information out, and it's releasing dopamine all throughout the brain. Following this equation, oops. All right. Again, I'm not going to geek out on you and go into that. But what that information is something we call a reward prediction error. It's a teaching signal. Right? So if you've heard of dopamine in the media, you might have heard it as a kind of pleasure molecule or an addiction molecule. It's certainly involved in those things, but that's not what it does. What it does is it teaches the brain, it changes the brain, allows it to adapt given information that it's received based on the choices you've made. And so this reward prediction error could be better than expected. You get an increase in dopamine, or it could be worse than expected. In that case, you get a dip in dopamine. And both of those are changing the structures in your brain in real time. So based on those kinds of signals, we go and we study different kinds of events that the brain has to process, right? And so we can take those equations that I blurred out earlier and start to make predictions about how an individual feels or would feel according to those equations and track those signals in the brain. And so here's one instance where we had participants going through, playing a task, they're winning money, they're losing money, and we're using those equations to predict how they might feel. And it's actually a very good prediction of how they feel. We test that behaviorally. But then we can take these computed signals and take data that we've collected while the patient is in the scanner or in the surgical suite and ask questions about where are those signals showing up in the brain. And so those green and magenta colored images are regions that are calculating based on what we think is being calculated, kind of positive feelings or negative feelings. The exact same game, a different calculation, we can ask about how levels of arousal, right? How excited or anxious an individual might feel, depending on the valence of that. We can also ask about the kind of valence representations. And we see some overlapping, some distinct, but what the take home here is that it's widespread, right? So if you have lesions or damage or changes in these structures, it's going to change how these computations are kind of all integrated. Again, these were the same patients in the same games, and so the idea is that you have this entire network of brain regions interacting in real time, dynamically changing. And what I didn't show there was that these dopaminergic signals, these serotonergic signals, are driving the kind of coherence, the unity of these networks, and changing it in real time. And it's also really driving these kind of feelings, right? So when you have a surprising event, maybe it's a really good event, or really it's a negative, bad news, you're going to get these neuromodulatory signals, these dopamine and serotonin signals, driving these networks and kind of pushing the brain into a state that we experience as a highly emotional one, right? And you make very different decisions when you're in that kind of a state than if you're in a calm, kind of mindful state. So just to kind of get into ways in which we process information, right? We've done a couple of studies. Here is one where the same stimulus, I've graded out to spare you, but it's a disgusting image. It could be like a dirty toilet or things like that. I won't give you a bunch of examples. But a single disgusting image, we show it to you while you're in the scanner, and we can predict whether you're a liberal or a conservative, right? And that was somewhat known from kind of political studies, that liberals and conservatives are not meaning Democrats and Republicans. This is the political ideology, right? That the way that their brains, our brains, process these disgusting images is just fundamentally different. Now, I can't interpret what's going on with these red and blue lines other than increased activity goes up, decreased activity goes down. But the biology, right, that we're born with plays itself out in our political ideologies, not our political parties, but the ideology. And we can read this out in how the brain is processing what's essentially the exact same information. It's just processing it fundamentally differently, right? We've also done studies looking at social interaction. So you put 5 individuals into a group setting and they solve problems together. And as they're solving problems, we give them a ranking based on how well they're doing, right? So you're in the front of the classroom if you're doing good, you get sent to the back of the classroom if you're doing bad, right? And we can see down below these kind of reward prediction errors. We expect that to be a dopaminergic signal as you increase your rank, surprisingly, right? But what's also going on, if you look into regions like the amygdala up here or the prefrontal cortex down here, the amygdala, well known for processing kind of emotion, fear, anxiety, goes up when you're in this setting. And as that goes up, the prefrontal cortex is not as active when you're trying to solve problems. And that's really critical, right? When you're trying to solve problems, the kinds that you might see, logic puzzles and things like that, your prefrontal cortex is engaged in that. But when your amygdala is up, this is going down. And as individuals go through this task, some habituate to it, others don't. Those that habituate to it, their amygdala comes down, the prefrontal cortex activity is coming up, and they can solve problems more effectively. In this kind of implicit competitive setting, women seem to be more sensitive to this effect. Right? Men are the individuals that seem to be able to decrease the amygdala activity early on and get the prefrontal cortex coming back on. We don't know why there's this gender effect. It's actually surprising. We didn't expect that, but we did control for that possibility. But it's just to say that these kind of group signals, these group interactions, can really drastically change your ability to solve problems and make decisions. Other individuals, other groups have studied if you put these groups to be not competitive but cooperative, women do better than men, right? And again, there's a lot of interesting biology to work out there. But it's not, all just doom and gloom that if you're stressed and anxious and emotional that you can't do anything. Of course you can, right? It's sort of great talk on resilience. Mindfulness can dampen some of these emotional responses. And we can look at not just the behavior, but again, with this brain imaging, that if you can practice mindfulness, and it doesn't have to be mindfulness meditation per se, but different ways of experiencing quiet, right, and awareness of the moment, then you can dampen some of these impulsive reactions. So I'll end there, and happy to take any questions. And again, thank you for hanging in there for the entire conference to listen to my talk and share my information. I appreciate you guys. I'll take questions. Yes? Oh.
I just wonder what you thought about how decision-making changes as you age.
Mm-hmm.
I read an article about how older people might be more susceptible to things like financial scams because of changes in the brain and how decision-making changes as you age. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a real thing, right? As we age. Oh, yeah. So the question was, thoughts or comments on how, as we age, how that affects the decision-making process. In particular, there's examples where individuals, particularly our seniors, are more susceptible to financial scams. And there's, unfortunately, a really strong kind of black market, so to speak, going after individuals that way. And that's a real thing, right? So as we age, absolutely. So from day one, all through our entire lives, the way that we make decisions is dramatically changing, particularly with stages of life, right? From adolescence, we're very risky, into our adulthood, we become a little more stable, maybe a little more responsible. But as we age, there's all kinds of interesting processes. So it's an active area of research, exactly what's going on there. But I would say that, there's a normal kind of process of aging that we would say within the kind of normal, healthy range. And by normal, it's just on average how people age. But mixed in with all of that, right? There's Alzheimer's and dementia and degeneration with age, and as those things are happening, the networks, right, that are involved in the decision-making process are getting disrupted, and so those kind of yellow flags, red flags that we might detect in our younger aged state aren't being detected. It's not hitting those same kind of circuits and kind of alerting, hey, this might be a scam, right? And unfortunately, patients are, or families are being susceptible to that. So trying to understand exactly what's going on there it is important. It's likely something to do with these networks being disrupted with the aging process. And that's where these support groups, right, support and caregivers and family and friends being there is really important to be the kind of signaling agent that's being lost.
The microphone's not working, 1 second.
Okay.
Sir, if you would mind, can you address brain fog? I'm going to leave it open there because I don't know enough to ask a smarter question. If you don't honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, just brain fog. Wife got brain surgery, whatever. So I'll leave it open. Thanks.
Yeah. So I always go back to thinking about how the brain works, right? And it is this really amazing machine, right? To use this kind of analogy. But it's not a machine in the sense that, right, your computer on your desktop has all these hardwired circuits that are rigid and in place, and any little bit of water on them is going to completely fry it, right? Our brain is different. It has these kind of wiring and the kind of signaling, and we can use this kind of computational idea to think about how the brain processes information, except that it's wet and it's gooey and dynamic, right? It can shake around and still kind of do its stuff. When you have a traumatic event to the brain, like a surgery, right, or a traumatic brain injury due to just a hit impact, right, there's these kind of micro forces or micro changes due to that trauma that are happening. And sometimes you can see it with an MRI. You can see the lesion; it's very clear, right, if it's big. Other times, it's much more subtle, and so there might be just subtle chemical changes that have occurred. And until the brain can kind of clean things up and get back to its normal state, it's not going to function exactly the same way. Now, the experience of fog, right, that feeling, we don't understand where that's coming from, right? But the slowness of processing is caused by a kind of damage, right? So even though the neurosurgeons are going in, doing their best to make sure that they're taking in care to do what they need to do and preserve function, it's just a traumatic event to the brain, right? And so part of the reaction that our body has is to mount up defenses and healing processes. And while that's going, sometimes it's better not to use the system, right? So I have teenage boys and kids that sprain their ankle, for instance, when they're playing soccer. It swells up, it hurts, it can't move. It's like the body's natural defenses. And so as the brain is going through a trauma like that, it's changed, right? The chemical nature of it's changed and it's coming back. And so when the fog clears, it's likely part of the healing process. But that feeling, that experience of fog, that's the kinds of things that we're really interested in trying to understand, like that subjective experiences associated with that. But yeah.
I have a question. Right.
Yeah.
In the back. So I know it said that our gut is almost like our second brain, and obviously there's a connection from our gut. Like if your gut health is terrible, then maybe your brain health is terrible, or your body health is terrible.
Mm-hmm.
Like what do you think of the saying is like trust your gut, or like your first initial instinct when making a decision? And maybe like, obviously this is connecting both your brain health and your gut, but do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things to unpack there, right? So that intuition, that gut feeling, there's absolutely instances where that's the right thing to do. And there's instances where that's not the right thing to do. Of course, the challenge is to know which ones is which. And I don't know the answer to that. But I think it has something to do with, again, if you think about your life experiences, and there's all this information that you're absorbing that you're not even aware of sometimes. And so you could be in a situation where certain cues, certain context is reminding your brain, and it's unconscious to you, but it's reminding your brain of past scenarios, past situations, and it's pointing you towards what you should do. Now, you also have these other ideas that are in your brain. You're worrying about the future, right? You're thinking about all these other things. And that's a competing kind of vote in what you should do, what your choice should be. And so I would definitely recommend listening to your gut in the sense of it's a voice to be heard, right? But maybe it's not the final say, right? Because if trusting your gut or going with your gut means you take a really big risk, weigh the pros and cons, get outside advice, listen to other people's guts, but it's not a simple thing. Now the gut as your second brain, that's a whole other thing, right? Because it turns out the microbiome, what's in your gut, there's all this information that's actually being processed in every part of your body. And it's a really amazing kind of new area of neuroscience research is studying gut biology, because when you eat and you get these things in you, your gut is actually sending signals to your brain and telling you essentially about your environment, right, in ways that we can't sense any other way. And that's just a fascinating area of research where there's a lot more to be done. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right, that's all the questions we have time for. Thank you so much, Dr. Kishida. I'm going to hand it over back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kishida, for such an engaging and interesting session. And for those of you that missed it, Dr. Kishida, I sincerely apologize that at the exact moment you said right now you're making the decision to not walk out of this room, I was walking out of the room to take care of something. So I'm very sorry. Anyway, we made it, you guys! Yay! We are done. I want to remind everybody that we would love for you to share your feedback. Please give us your honest feedback on what I think the QR code should be coming up soon. On what you would like to see differently, what you liked, what would be something else we could do to help support you and educate you and make this engaging and entertaining. So please scan the QR code and fill it out. It should only take 5 to 10 minutes. And if you provide your email at the end, you do have a chance to win a prize. So that's always good. And then our conference app, Whova, if you have been using it, it will remain open after the conference for about 3 months. So you can continue to chat with each other through there. You can continue to gather information and resources. And then you can also rewatch all of the live stream sessions right away. And then in about a month or so, you will get an email with a link to all of the YouTube recordings, so you can access it that way as well. All right. So throughout the weekend, I guess, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, we have been having little prizes happening or contests happening on Whova. So we are ready to announce some winners. If you are not here or you are attending virtually, we will mail your prize to you. So if I call your name, please stand up and Vanessa will bring your prize to you. So for the leaderboard contest on Whova, Jacqueline Mamella, I know she's remote, so congratulations, Jacqueline. Yay! Jessica Fornander, are you still here? Jessica left, okay, we will send it to her. Donnie Tran, who is remote, congratulations, and James Kennedy in person, yay! Vanessa will bring you your prize. All right, for our photo contest, this person is remote, so Sarah Brunel, you won our photo contest, so congratulations. For our passport contest, Todd Schaefer, are you still here? No? Well, congratulations, we'll send it to you. For the icebreaker contest, Shirley Hayes. Yay, she's here, Vanessa. Congrats. For our trivia contest, personally one of my dear friends and previous coworkers, Melinda Langdon. And for our research poster, I don't know if she is still here, but I love the fact that this one was the winner, Lori Mins. She had a poster on caregiving, so awesome, congratulations. All right, before I welcome our wonderful co-chairs back up for their closing remarks, we are excited to be able to announce that our national conference will be back here at the Renaissance next year, 2025, Friday, September 12th through Sunday, September 14th. So a little bit different dates, but those will be the dates. So we're excited to let you know that now. So mark your calendars so you can attend. You're not going to want to miss it. And then I will welcome our wonderful conference planning co-chairs to come on up and say a few closing remarks.
All right, thank you everyone for being here. And we want first and foremost to thank all our speakers for their amazing job, for their generosity, for sharing their knowledge to empower this community and get us to better places in the future. I also want to thank the organizers because they've done an unbelievable work, and it's been a great pleasure and a privilege to work along them to organize this conference. Thank you.
This has been a great weekend. Thank you all for coming, being engaged both in person and virtually. I hope you leave hopeful and inspired about this community and the work that's being done and meeting someone new and having a chance to continue that connection. So thank you all for everything this weekend. It's been a delight. One more hand for Mindy and Emily and everyone who has planned the meeting. Safe travels.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Peñas-Prado and Dr. Stroud. Once again, just amazing. You guys have been so great to work with. We really appreciate you. I also want to make sure that I thank all of ABTA staff. I don't know if staff is still in the room. I know they have been busy packing up and doing pictures and helping with volunteer roles and so many little things that you probably have not realized that they have been doing, but this conference would not be able to be put on without all of their additional support, along with all of the volunteers. For those of you still here, thank you so much. Without you, we wouldn't be able to put this on either. So thank you to everybody there. And then also special thanks to my team. You guys all know Emily, who has been up here, Breen, who has been up here, and Vanessa, who has not been up here, but she's new, so we'll give her that. We'll wait till next year. But you guys have just been amazing helping with this conference and planning this conference. I appreciate you all so much, and we're gonna have to start, I'll give you tomorrow, Monday off, but then Tuesday we're back to starting planning next year. So get ready for that, Em. All right, and then I also want to give a huge thanks to ABTA's president and CEO, Ralph DeVito. We are saddened that after an amazing 7 years of dedicated service, Ralph will be stepping down from his role as our CEO. He has been such an amazing and inspiring and committed leader, always keeping patients at the front of mind. Under his leadership, we have not only achieved remarkable milestones, but he has also built a strong and resilient team, united by a shared vision. As you embark on your new chapter of your life, we want to extend our deepest gratitude. Thank you for your tireless dedication, your visionary guidance, and your unwavering support. We wish you nothing but the best in your retirement. So please join me once again in welcoming ABTA's president and CEO, Ralph DeVito.
How about Mindy? Isn't she amazing? Just amazing. The whole team is. Roy, Marta, again, thank you so much. Just great conference. Everyone online, everyone here in person, thank you for your support. And I am really appreciative of the entire brain tumor community and the service that the ABTA provides. Let me also add to Mindy's thanks that Mindy, Emily, and Breen, and Vanessa, would you stand one more time? Let us thank you. These are the folks that have been working for most of the year to put this conference on, all the details, and it's the whole team. I also want to recognize someone who is the overall leader of our mission work, patient services, research, Nicole Wilmarth. Nicole, thank you. She really makes sure that her team gets the resources they need to do the job to serve you. Speaking of serving you, our sponsors and funders, Servier, Brain Tumor Network. Boy, you guys have been phenomenal in underwriting the ability for us to live stream and record and to present back to anyone, anytime, the information, to Novacure, to Neuro42, our platinum sponsors, Genentech and Imvex. Thank you all very much for being here. They have shut down their booths finally, but they were just, I think, a wealth of information for many of you, wherever you are in your journey. I hope you can come back next year. Let us, the ABTA team, continue to serve you wherever you are at any part of your journey. We want to be there to support you. So thank you. Travel safely.